welcome to this episode of the Your Day, Your Rules podcast. I'm Michael.
And I'm Sev, and you're about to listen to some provocative chat about the frustrations many of us feel at work.
Offering practical tips to reach your authentic potential and insights gained from our professional experience.
Whatever your background, come and join us at a secret water cooler conversation.
Let's begin.
So, Michael, I've got a question for you.
Okay, this is ominous.
Do you remember in your career when you sort of transitioned from that manager state or the doer state to somebody actually giving you that chance and that leg up to say, right, you're actually seen as a leader now?
I can recall it, and I just transitioned into the role. It was, for me, I never actually had a conscious plan that this is where I was going to reach. I didn't think, oh, I'm going to be CEO. I did think I wanted to become partner, because I thought, well, that will be just the natural progression of what my career had been up to that date. But I thought I would be doing less managerial work and more sort of case handling or file handling work. But what happened over time is, because certain projects had come up within work that allowed me to the flexibility to show different sides of my my skill set, and I was willing to embrace those fully. That situation arose, but it was I found it a very difficult transition to make, because again, in my mind, I had a certain mental framework. I thought, well, this is who I am, and breaking out of that and viewing myself in a different way was not something I felt particularly comfortable with. And also, if you know that there are people who've got families and they have responsibilities, and if things don't go a certain way in the company, that you're putting lots of people at risk, then you assume that you assume the feelings that if you let them down, it's going to
That's
impact
a lot
on
to take.
it impacts on a lot of people. So you have these ideas in your mind which aren't perhaps necessarily reflective of reality, but they are big fears. And when that fear becomes sort of overwhelming or all-consuming, you need the skills, or you need the mindset which enables you to take a step back, assess the landscape in front of you objectively, and to almost decouple from your thoughts, and to say, well, thoughts are information that my brain is giving me, but they're not necessarily true. Or how do I assess what quality of thoughts I give my attention to? Because I think you can give all your attention, or the majority of your attention, to the fear, or you can give the majority of your attention to the potential upside.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
I don't mean, looking at things in a very Pollyanna-ish way,
Yeah.
and being delusional about what's going on. But if you're acting on the basis of limited information, which in most cases you are, everybody's acting on the basis of not full information, then you can veer yourself towards a more positive outlook on it, rather than veering towards the disaster scenario, or think, oh, this is going to go all horribly wrong. And what happens if I fail? That's just going to look ridiculous. And then I'm going to torpedo my future career, or my reputation is going to lie in ruins around me. And it never got to the stage where it was anywhere near that bad. But in my head,
Yeah.
the battle that was going on in my mind was fierce.
And that was sort of driven from a place of fear of, it was fear making those decisions, but you felt the fear and you did it anyway.
Yeah. And the thing is that it's really weird, but when your mind manifests fear, it arises in the body as well.
Absolutely.
So you can, so you as a person are an integrated system. It's not the mind, it's not the body. Everything's interconnected. So you feel that racing, you feel the tightness in your throat, and when you're under profound levels or high levels of stress, the quality of your decision making can deteriorate, and you don't make perhaps the best decisions for you, the company, for the situation that you could make if you observe your thoughts rather than being one with your thoughts and one with your emotions. So
Yeah.
if you can have that distance,
Step outside of your head.
yeah.
Are you a bit of a problem solver?
I I am, unfortunately. And I say unfortunately because it takes a lot of emotional and intellectual bandwidth
Yeah.
to do that. And also, what I think we mentioned this in the previous episode, what you're doing, or what I was doing, was taking away opportunities for other people to grow and taking them on myself.
Mm-hmm.
And what I should have actually been doing is delegating more. And, if people wanted help, being the source of help, but empowering them for them to go on and succeed, rather than taking this all for myself.
Yeah, that's quite interesting actually. I even thinking about it today, being from the sort of cultural backgrounds that we come from and the socioeconomic conditions that we found ourselves in when we were really young, I used to find it really difficult to sort of delegate or ask people to do stuff, or
Yeah,
it was sort of, first of all, it was, can I trust them to do it how I want it done? Because the perfectionist in me was kind of rising time and time again. It was kind of like, I can't afford for this to fail, so I'll just do it all myself, sort of thing.
yeah,
But also it was that thing of, I never would want anybody to feel like they're less and therefore they have to do more, sort of thing. So, any of my team who are working under me, sort of thing, I would never ever want to be the sort of leader who would almost delegate in a way that makes them feel like they have to do something,
yeah,
otherwise their worth is dependent on just that exercise. And going back to that chatter that you were talking about, it's interesting because it's sort of that thing of, am I am I am I acting this way because of the fear, or or is there a balance to be had between what I'm fearing versus, I'm going to fear it and I'm going to do it anyway, and I'm going to prove to myself that I can do it, sort of thing.
yeah.
So it's an interesting balancing act
Balancing
when
act.
you're
Yeah,
emerging from being the doer to being the manager, to then becoming a leader and having that extra level of responsibility.
yeah. But that transition from being a manager to leader doesn't always happen. Actually, it doesn't happen for most people, I think. And particularly for people from marginalized communities. Because as we were talking about in previous episodes, if you take things on, people might think, oh, well, Michael, he's a great guy. He does things. But I don't think of Michael as a leader, because I think in terms of what a leader is and the exercise of power, leaders are powerful because they can make people do things that they don't want to do in the furtherance of a company goal,
Mhm.
even if they don't like it.
Mhm.
I mean, if they can inspire people to do it off their own backs, all well and good. But if that isn't the case, it's going to get done however it gets done, whoever does it, because that's what a leader does. And they set a vision and they bring people along with them and make sure that what they want to achieve gets done, however it gets done.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if you're always accepting work, then the mental model that people in senior leadership positions have of you may not be the one that gets you to the next stage of your career. So there is that trap of just accepting everything and anything. Again, as long as it is building your skill set, and as long as it's furthering you towards the career, or the goal that you want, all good. But if it isn't, particularly when you get to a more senior level, you have to learn to prioritize what your needs are within the business. But again, it's difficult because the pressure is constantly
Building.
and ramping up.
How much do you think, in our sort of transition from management to leadership, does our sort of mental chatter that we have, how much is that influenced by that original wiring, or is it a combination of that plus a new level that we've imposed on ourselves, a new slither or slice
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
that we put on ourselves to think, oh, now I have to be like this? And it's almost like, I can almost imagine the reset button happening, but in a negative way, where you go, well, I've actually now become more of myself, and I've reached a level of success and respect, and I've taught people how to treat me. But then you get that opportunity to be a leader, and do you remember going back to that and thinking, oh, now I have to kind of be like this and
Yeah.
suit up like this
Yeah.
and turn
Yeah.
up like this?
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
it's like, again, a new
Yeah. So
chapter.
there's a new chapter, and I think it goes back to knowing fundamentally who you are, what your self-concept is, and whether that aligns with you. And it may come to the point where you think, actually, I don't want to be a leader.
Yeah.
It's not actually in furtherance of my true purpose, of my true goal. And
It's not my definition of
no,
success necessarily, because there are people, we all go to work, we're all set up in the world to have to go to work and earn a living and provide for our families and loved ones and ourselves and whatnot. But the definition of success is very different to everybody, and you don't necessarily have to be a leader to find yourself successful. There are
Yeah.
different definitions and variations of that,
Yeah.
right? So if it's not going to make you happy and it's not in line with your values and what you want as your purpose, then you got to really reflect on that before you take that step.
And I think the question of it is, when is it enough? Is it ever enough? And I think a lot of people are striving towards something because they've got these unarticulated desires or dreams or wishes, which if they brought to the forefront of their mind, they'd probably think, why am I doing this? This isn't actually serving my purpose. This isn't actually serving my goal, but I'm driven towards it because I spent so long not wanting to look or examine what's going on inside me that I've just let external forces take me to a certain position. And I'm still doing that. I'm still this, on this wheel that keeps constantly spinning and spinning.
Is that a bit attached to ego, do you think?
I'd say so.
Yeah.
I think actually a lot of it is due to ego. So this idea of I need respect or I need to be seen in a certain way, whereas it might not actually be who you are under the surface. And if you ask yourself, why is this important to me? You might get to a completely different state. So it's important to me to have a good position so I can be respected by my family.
Mm-hmm.
What's important to my family? Oh, the fact that I'm around and I'm fully present with them and I take my time with them. Do I need this position to achieve that goal? No, I don't.
Mm-hmm.
So what's important to me now? What's important to me now is a good work-life balance. How do I achieve a good work-life balance? And I do it this way.
Yeah.
Rather than I'm on autopilot, blinkers on,
Yeah.
let's go. And then in 20 years' time, look back and think, oh, actually, that isn't what I wanted.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the autopilot thing is really, really important, isn't it? Because it's almost like there are unwritten rules in places where we feel like you have to go from this point to this point and then this point, and everybody tries to follow those. But if you decide actually that certain things bring you happiness or you measure success by different definitions, then you don't necessarily have to follow that pattern, and you go down that route of the squiggly career almost of trying to find something that is worth you actually.
Yeah.
It's quite an interesting time to really reflect upon sort of things that we never had a chance to do that's been democratized now, and that we can actually level up towards. But it's a funny old conversation if I was to have a chat about this with my parents, where it blows them away that someone across the country could be working at the same organization as me, and or there's a black female that's become the CEO or something. It's kind of like, I talked about my mum being a rebel, and she's kind of like, why wasn't this the case in my time, sort of thing. So it's funny. It's almost like I almost feel now that both to prove to my mum and my dad that certain challenges and struggles that they had to live by, that we've got a better kind of foothold to kind of take the next step and seize the opportunity and seize the day on some of these things, right? I feel not pressure, but I feel sort of like the drive is it's there, and also to make it even bigger for my daughter, or my son.
But representation really matters. And I know some people think, oh, it's tokenistic, or why does it really matter what somebody looks like, or what gender they are, or what race they are? And it shouldn't matter, but it does, because lots of us operate on this unconscious framework, and we look at people and we have snapshots of information and we stereotype them and we put them in certain boxes and say, well, I'm going to fit you in here. And that's just that's the normal way of human beings processing vast amounts of information. We'll never have the processing power to get in all the information and make a fully
it's the
well-rounded.
shortcuts and the heuristics that we rely upon
Yeah.
to be able to make decisions day in, day out at the end of the day.
Yeah.
But it's the moment of questioning whether or not those stereotypes or
are true.
Yeah.
Exactly. And the thing is, I think as an organization, you must come to the point where you're questioning why we do things or why certain people are progressing and other people aren't. And it's not just because, some people are lacking in talent or lacking in, I don't know, experience or presence or whatever it is that takes you to the next level. And I think if you're, as a company, if you're not seeing adequate progression amongst groups, there's a reason for that.
And a time to question
it. And being very open and it's probably very uncomfortable, but saying, okay, we embrace that level of discomfort, because as individuals, you embrace that level of discomfort to be successful. So as an organization, you should, if you want your organization to flourish, you should accept that level of discomfort as well.
Absolutely.
And a lot of life is perception.
All of life is perception, I would argue. For sure.
We as human beings, we don't see the world, we render it. So, light bounces off objects and it gets taken in via electrical impulses, and that gets sent to the brain. And the brain basically fits together a map of what it thinks it sees.
Yeah.
So everybody sees the world slightly differently. I think there was that, I think we discussed this before, the internet meme of the black and the gold dress, or was it white and gold, or white, or was something along those lines.
Yeah.
And when I was absolutely sure that people were just taking the mickey, I thought, I see it as blue and gold. How does also blue and black? I think it was, rather than white and gold. You're winding me up. You must see it the same way I see it, because in my mind I thought, well, we all see things
the same, but we don't. All of our wiring and experiences, like we were saying, some people just kind of reach to places so much more easily than others, and it's because the question of not actually being able to get to their destination has never even been a thought that they had to ponder. So the complete opposite of the wiring that we've had, or the exposure that we've had, that's kind of made us question and created this chatter monster that sits on our backs. When we are given the opportunity to actually embrace leadership or turn up to work with more gravitas because we've still trust in people who have given us the opportunity to become leaders, right? It's kind of like, I don't know about you, I just feel like getting a bat and chucking it off my back and beating it down. Because also, we've talked about feeling not obligated, but what was the word you used? It was like a responsibility to do that for our parents, and also a responsibility to pave the way that's even more opportunistic for our kids. But it's also our peers, right? Like some people, they may lack the courage or the opportunity or the skill set, etc. So I feel obliged to also just really go for it and really show up when these opportunities arise. And actually, looking at my experience, it was probably a little bit of the delusional side, because as I said in previous episodes, I've always had that turn up and be the best you can and nothing can stop me attitude. So I was probably one of those delusional people that went, yeah, sure, I can be CEO tomorrow. Give it to me now.
That's an amazing attitude, though.
But the reality is it comes down to balance again, doesn't it? It's about turning up, putting the best version of you forward, and trying to really believe and let that belief seep in that you've got here already. Like, how many more proof points do you need for that chatter monster to just
be
piss
quiet
off? Quite frankly.
But it will never go away.
But this is the thing. What's the antidote, Michael?
It's there constantly, and it will never go away. But that's just the way our brains, unfortunately, are wired. And I think again, it's just taking a step back and observing your thoughts for what they are. And that's information. They're mental events that come and they go and they give you information, just like your body gives you information. And what you can do is then marry up all that information and come to a really good assessment of what's going on in front of you, rather than just accepting, well, my mind's told me this, it must be true. You are not your thoughts.
Yeah.
You're something other than your thoughts. But going back to, the perception and representation and perception, Representation is incredibly important. You mentioned gravitas. Gravitas is, I think, a set of markers or a set of signals that somebody presents, which has been reinforced through stereotypes over time. So if you think of a CEO, you probably think of somebody who's older, sort of a white, who's a man, who presents himself in a certain way. And no doubt these people are fantastically competent, or usually they're fantastically competent. But that's not the only definitional marker of gravitas, or that's not the only definition or boundaries of who's creative or who gets to be invested in.
Yeah, there was actually a study that was run specifically on these things, where if you were to ask or if you were to ask somebody to imagine or picture somebody in their mind when you said a mother, the general population apparently across the board in this research was that they picture a white female as a mum, basically. And then if you were to ask them picture in your head a black person, then majority would picture a black man, apparently. So there are certain, as you say, markers or stereotypes or labels or ways of thinking that we've used to compartmentalize and give meaning to things. I think even though that's the case, as we've said, it's an opportunity to try and basically give things new meanings and rewrite those rules, because it's your day and your rules at the end of the day, isn't it?
That's exactly right. But I think now is the time. Now is the culture. We've reached a cultural watershed, and I think it's good. And this moment was inevitably going to come, but it's here. I think stepping up, particularly at a senior leadership level, and also reflecting back on the experiences that you went through and the hardships and the struggles that you went through, and thinking, I don't want people who are like what I went through to do that, or to have that same experience that I did. And I want it to be fairer. I want it to be more inclusive, and it's within our power to do that. Feeling that sense of responsibility is not necessarily a bad thing. You don't have to carry all of it. You don't think, you don't have to change the entire world. But if you change a piece at a time, you'll still do a lot of good.
Absolutely. And I think changing, I think you've told me this before, changing the world is so you were quoting somebody, I can't remember. Changing the world is turning up and making a difference little by little yourself first as an individual, to try and, make a ripple effect and a real difference, sort of thing. So I suppose the biggest thing that we've really taken out of all of this is the fact that if we're fortunate enough to be an individual from a group that's either marginalized or different or doesn't fit the default mold of how people think, I think the transition between being a doer or being a manager and moving into a leadership position, even though it might feel scary and come with more responsibility, the summary of all of this is that you've got to feel that discomfort and go for it anyway, because really, I mean, you've come this far. Right. And it's probably unlikely that you're going to fall flat on your face. And the worst thing that could happen is that you die at the end of the day, right? Without being too morbid, right? You can dust yourself off and that will
pick yourself back up.
In itself be a lesson to other people to model up against anyway. So with all of that, I think we have touched a little bit on feeling like a bit of an imposter at times. And remind me, Michael, is that what we're talking about next in our next episode?
I think it is. I think we've got a 3-part series coming up on imposter syndrome, about how it first came to prominence, whether it applies to you, what to do if it does as an individual, but also importantly, what an organization can do to support employees, particularly if it's prevalent within your organization.
Amazing. I can't wait for that. But for now, we'll see you next time.
See you next time.
You've been listening to the Your Day, Your Rules podcast with Sev and Michael.
Before we go, we'd like to say a big thank you to all of our listeners and for sharing our content with someone who needs it.
Keep spreading the word and remember to like, subscribe and follow us here and on our socials.
Until next time, if you want to go fast, go alone.
If you want to go far, go together.